Amazing single father discovered a lonely woman on her birthday. What she did next was incredible. Jake wiped his hands on a greasy rag, the tendrils of engine oil settling into the creases of his palms. His field was a cacophony of labor, a reluctant symphony of tools clattering and engines purring, a stark contrast to the bubbling laughter drifting from the park just beyond the garage. The sound knotted in his chest, amplifying the loneliness that had become all too familiar since he lost Rachel. Whenever he closed his eyes, he could almost see her smile, just as he carved out another long day to provide for their 2 children. Working on Emma's decrepit sedan, he glanced through the window to catch her soft silhouette, brushes and paint scattered around her small apartment nearby. Her eyes, so often painted with vivid colors on the canvas, reflected an ache that paralleled his own. He felt a stirring, an unsettling interplay between yearning for connection and loyalty to his children. Could he afford to reach out to her, to possibly invite more loss into their fragile lives after what they had endured? As he tightened the last bolt, his mind raced, not about the car, but about her. What if she can't accept a man burdened by loss? The question haunted him. Just before he crossed the threshold to hand the keys back, he grappled with a deeper moral dilemma: risk vulnerability or retreat back to isolation. His body hesitated, pausing long enough that he almost turned away. But he knocked. "Dinner, with us. I know it's short notice," he managed, uncertainty rippling through him as he offered the invitation. A vivid blush stained Emma's cheeks, her hesitance palpable even against the backdrop of gentle hope. Okay," she whispered, the word quaking on her lips. The tension shifted slightly. A window opened, yet a shadow loomed ominously overhead. What if her loneliness collided with their burdens, spiraling them both into a deeper darkness? What if he had just opened a door to heartache? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. Around the dinner table, laughter flickered tentatively. Jake's children, bemused by the curious newcomer, filled the air with tales of playground antics. But as Jake glanced at Emma, his heart twisted with anxiety. He longed to unravel his own grief, to confess that every moment of joy felt laced with bitter remnants of pain. Would she understand? The quiet sadness etched on her face told him she might have her own burdens. He felt deeply, painfully aware of every fissure in their fractured lives. Just as Emma began to share, tracing the contours of her artistic dreams with cautious words, Jake felt a ripple of tension. A flicker of vulnerability slipped through, exposing the wounds they both wore beneath the surface. As the pie cooled on the table, the specter of uncertainty grew, stifling the delicate chemistry that had kindled. Would it be acceptable to let this flicker grow into a flame, or might they only burn each other? Emma's brow furrowed as she weighed her next words, fear dancing behind her gaze. Jake felt the pressure swelling, a reflexive instinct to shield both her and his children from possible heartbreak, but knew he couldn't let fear dictate his choices. As she took a deep breath to continue, a haunting question hovered above them like a storm. Could they truly lower their defenses and confront the intricate web of grief and longing poised to entangle them both? Or would the shadows pull them back, one painful step at a time? Jake watched Emma closely, her words submerging into silence, as he felt the tension stretching between them like a taut string. His children continued sharing stories, blissfully unaware of the seismic shift happening beneath the surface. The laughter rang out, but Jake felt his heart clench. What were the rules for coexisting in this fragile moment? He could already hear the echoes of laughter coloring the air with joy, yet felt the shadows of his past dance around him, a reminder of everything he had lost. "Dad, are we going to play cards later?" his son piped up, a radiant smile lighting his face, pulling Jake from the dark spiral of his thoughts. "Of course, buddy, right after dessert," Jake assured, though he felt a fracture in his resolve. He should be the buoy, the consistent raft in the turbulent waters of their lives, yet Emma's presence made him long for the very storm he feared. As Emma laughed at the children's antics, he couldn't help but be drawn to her vulnerability. There was a depth in her eyes that resonated with him, a shared understanding wrapped in layers of their individual grief. He knew simplicity lived between them, but complexity clung like a shroud. Did she feel it too? Once dinner was finished, Jake settled the children into a game of cards, stepping out onto the porch to give Emma a moment with them. The air was warmer than usual, the taste of impending spring tickling his senses. It reminded him of hot summer nights when Rachel would sit beside him, watching fireflies flit about. The weight of nostalgia pressed onto him as he turned back. "Hey!" Emma appeared at the door, her voice soft yet steady. "Can I help with the dishes?" She shrugged, surprised by her offer. "Sure, that'd be great." It was a small gesture, yet it felt significant. As they stood side by side, at the sink, the warm water sudsing around their hands, Jake found himself assessing her all over again. He glanced at her, catching the way she concentrated, her brow slightly furrowed as she scrubbed away the remnants of their meal. She emanated strength and fragility all at once. "Do you—" Jake started, halting his words. He swallowed hard. Did he really want to pull the veil on their delicate bubble? "Do you ever feel like moving forward is impossible?" Emma paused, her hands still, water dripping off her fingers. "I think that's the struggle of every artist," she said slowly, the weight of her own experience coloring her confession. "We create to escape our pain, but the irony is that the pain can just seep into our art, too." Jake considered her words, the bitterness of recognizing that art and heartache had an uncanny resemblance. "You're right," he replied, leaning against the countertop. "I never thought I'd be standing in a place where I'd need to unravel what happiness looks like again." The silence stretched comfortably between them, but an undercurrent of anxiety lingered. Could he confront his fears? The questions loomed larger now. As they finished, he steeled himself. "Listen, I wanted to ask you something," he began, his heart racing against the wall of emotional gravity holding them back. But just before he could voice the possibility that had flickered in his mind, of a shared creation, a tentative exploration of feelings and fears, the doorbell rang, slicing through the moment. "Who could that be?" Emma asked, brushing the last of the suds off her hands, a flicker of tension sparking in her eyes. Jake's heart dropped. Had he really only just begun to scratch the surface, only to be pulled away again? What waited beyond the door? His fingers tightened against the countertop, the impending uncertainty swallowing his resolve. How would they conquer the shadows, and could his opening up now be forever disrupted? The moment for attention loomed, and with it came a decision that would clinch or splinter his budding connection with Emma forever. The door swung open, and a gust of cold air rushed in, punctuating the warmth of the kitchen. Jake's tension snapped at the sight of an old acquaintance, Mark, who stood on the threshold, eyes wide with surprise. "Jake, it's been ages!" Mark exclaimed, stepping inside with a half-smile, half-awkwardness that sent a jolt of uncertainty through Jake. "I was just in the neighborhood and thought I'd drop by." Emma glanced at Jake, a brief look that conveyed a question without words. Just as Jake had begun to navigate the waters between them, the tide had turned again. "Yeah, it has," Jake said. The warmth of Emma's presence was eclipsed by the sudden influx of the past, churning up memories he had half buried. Mark had been a part of their friend circle, an avid poker player with a charm that had always grated against Jake's quieter nature. "Hope I'm not interrupting anything," Mark said, his eyes scanning the room, settling on Emma, who appeared to awkwardly fumble with a drying cloth. There was a tightness in Jake's chest as unease rippled through him, an unfamiliar sense of protectiveness. "Not at all," Emma offered sweetly, her smile fragile as she stepped toward them. I was just helping Jake with the dishes after dinner. Right, impressive teamwork, Mark responded, his tone veering toward playful as he shot a teasing glance at Jake. So, are you two a thing now? I didn't get the memo. Jake clenched his jaw, the double-edged comment cutting deeper than Mark could know. The excitement that had burst forth moments ago with Emma had been quashed, replaced by the weight of expectations from his past. He wasn't equipped to deal with this layer of scrutiny, especially now of all times. No, we're just friends, old friends, catching up, Jake asserted, struggling to infuse confidence into his words. He could feel Emma's eyes on him, questioning, seeking reassurance in the midst of Mark's invasion. With each passing second, Jake felt the bitter need for vulnerability battling against the reflexive urge to shield his heart. Should he be transparent, revealing what he truly felt for Emma? Or would he retreat into the safety of surface-level interactions that kept others at arm's length? Mark's presence should have stoked small talk, but instead it siphoned the warmth from the room. Their conversations meandered through trivialities, sports, work, common friends, while Jake's thoughts swirled beneath the surface, weighing down every exchange. He stole quick glances at Emma, noting the barely perceptible tension in her posture. Was she uncomfortable with Mark's nonchalance? Did she sense the chasm growing between them? The minutes stretched, and Jake's stomach churned with the realization that this encounter had deepened his internal conflict. He was not just struggling with the shadows of his past, he was also grappling with the fear of what a potential future might entail, one that included Emma but was now tangled with nostalgic ties from a life he had begun to sever. Finally, as Jake felt the gravity of his silence stretching thin, he caught Mark's gaze, a flicker of challenge ignited. "So, what's going on with you, Mark? Still trying to make your big break in that marketing gig?" The question slipped out, defensively, maybe, and for the first time in a long stretch, he felt a spark of assertiveness. Mark shrugged, but responded earnestly, directing attention away from Jake's hesitant explosion. The focus shifted, leaving Jake to gather his thoughts, interspersed with the blaring internal alarm that reminded him the moment was passing. As the evening wore on, Jake felt the pull towards Emma, her laughter, her creative spirit. But with every meant-to-be connection confronting old ghosts, the path ahead grew more treacherous. He knew he had to make a move, something definitive. It was time to decide whether to walk down the road of possibility with Emma or to retreat and let fear dictate his choices. But how? Long could he wait? Each moment baked the implication of risk, and with it the promise of understanding he desperately craved. With a newfound resolve boiling within him, Jake wondered if he could re-establish the connection he felt, the singular thread that had sparked amidst the chaos. What lay beyond this moment? Perhaps a chance to redefine everything. And as Mark continued chatting, oblivious to the tension, Jake's heart raced with the thought, was it time to take a stand, to embrace what he feared most? Because in the shadows of doubt, the flicker of opportunity lingered, waiting for him to act. The warmth of the kitchen suddenly felt constricting as Jake weighed his options with increasing urgency. Mark's casual banter reverberated in his ears, each joke a reminder of the potential for risk and vulnerability that loomed over him like a dark cloud. "Listen, I've been thinking about making a move on that marketing project," Mark rambled, bringing Jake's attention back to him. The man seemed oblivious to the turmoil that had woven itself into the fabric of the room, dismissing Jake's internal strife with unintentional ease. The way Mark smiled and laughed, carefree and secure, gnawed at Jake's insides, a stark contrast to his own unease. Realistically, Jake had long since walked away from the informal gatherings where small talk ruled. He craved depth, connection, and a chance to redefine relationships that mattered. But how could he forge a new path if he remained tethered to the past? He looked to Emma, the anchor he'd discovered beneath the waves of his uncertainty. Emma, he started, his words threading together at the tips of his tongue, fragile but insistent. But before he could finish, Mark unleashed another round of jokes, each laugh from him a hammer striking at the wall of Jake's determination. "I was going to ask you both to join me for poker next week." Mark had his sights set on their schedule now, his tone bright, as if they were still the same trio of laughter and light-hearted competition from years ago. Jake's heart sank. This wasn't just a friendly suggestion. It felt like an invasion of the quiet sanctuary that he had just begun to build with Emma. "Thanks, but I think I'll pass," he declared, each word settling like stones in the pit of his stomach. Mark's eyebrows arched in surprise. "Oh, you sure? It could be fun. A little nostalgia, right?" "Nostalgia," Jake murmured, almost more to himself than anyone else. Somewhere within him, the word ignited a flame of introspection. He could cling to the cordial remnants of yesterday, or he could step into the unknown, as unsteady as it might seem in the moment. Emma glanced at him again, and in her gaze he found a tentative spark, one that mirrored his own desire for change. She seemed to sense the current between them shifting, her curiosity piqued by her assertion. The interplay of their emotions whispered a question. Was this simply temporary, or the start of something new? Taking a deep breath, Jake focused on Emma, his voice steadying within him like a train on a fixed track. "What do you think, Emma? Would you like to share a different sort of experience next week?" Her puzzled expression quickly morphed into intrigue, a challenge dancing in her eyes. Jake watched her consider the invitation, the gravity of the moment dawning on them both. This was no longer about evading an inherited past. It was about seizing a possible future. Mark interjected. "You mean like a dinner? Just the two of you?" Jake's heart quickened. He could feel Mark aiming those words like a playful jab to deflate what had started to brew with Emma. It wasn't just a dinner he envisioned. It was a step towards clarity, toward capturing what lay just beneath the surface of their friendship. "Yeah, we could do that," Emma finally agreed, her smile laced with a hint of mischief. "Perhaps it's time for something new." Jake felt a rush of exhilaration mixed with anxiety. It wasn't a guarantee that this would resolve everything. However, the very act of declaring intention was a monumental leap forward. Every neuron in his brain fired with determination, igniting glimpses of strength that had long lain dormant. As Mark nodded nonchalantly, Jake's resolve began to crystallize. This wasn't merely about Emma or Mark. It was about Jake taking responsibility for the shape of his own future. He needed to control the narrative, and shedding the weight of old expectations would carve the path to the transformation he sought. Yet, as the evening wound down, Mark's presence threatened to engulf that quiet camaraderie. Just as Jake felt he'd lowered an old emotional barricade, Mark leaned in with a questioning tone, a glimmer of mischief in his eye. "What are you two really up to?" Suddenly, the challenge for Jake was not just clarity with Emma, but confronting Mark on the implications, explaining himself without flinching. It felt as though he was on the precipice of a defining moment, one that had waited far too long to be acknowledged. The lights in the kitchen flickered, almost as if punctuating the shift in the air. Jake's heart raced with an unshakable sense of impending confrontation. The time had come to face not just the past, but to carve out a future on his terms. What was he truly ready to embrace? Jake looked into Mark's eyes, feeling an urge to rise to the conflict brewing. The shadows loomed around, entwining with his rising determination. How would he navigate this tangled web, and what would it reveal about his own desires? Jake took a short breath, grounding himself as he stared into Mark's probing gaze. The air thickened around them, and for a moment the world beyond the kitchen faded. Could he articulate the transformation he so desperately sought? "Let's just say, things are changing," Jake replied, each word wrestling against the tension. He could sense Mark's curiosity morphing into something else, perhaps skepticism,
perhaps a jagged edge waiting to cut. Jake prepared himself for the counter from Mark, that familiar banter which he had either been longing to provoke or dreading to ignite. Mark raised an eyebrow, a smirk playing at the corner of his mouth. "Changing? Since when do you take such a sudden interest in change? You're usually the one who prefers to stick to what you know." The jab landed, igniting an old wound in Jake. It was true. Complacency had often sealed his resolve, trapping him in familiar but unsatisfying patterns. Yet now, with Emma standing at the periphery and a surge of possibility igniting within him, he felt bolder. Everyone reaches a point, Mark, even those who claim they're content. Maybe this is mine. Mark's amusement faded, replaced by a flicker of contemplation. Jake seized the moment, hoping to leverage the wavering judgment reflected in Mark's darkening eyes. "Your poker night won't be the same as what I might discover beyond that table. I need something different." "What's different for you, Jake? Is it really Emma?" Mark's tone shifted, becoming sharper as he edged closer. "You can't just leap blindly because you think it's time for change. If you think this moment is worth it, you have to act accordingly. But let me warn you," he leaned in, daring Jake to flinch, "don't drag people into your uncertainties." Every word sliced through Jake, but it served a purpose, an inadvertent challenge to fortify his resolve. He had been coasting for far too long, and now the tug of ambition clashed with old habits. He had the choice to retreat or to confront the whirlwind of self-doubt clawing at his subconscious. "Right, so I'll stand again, and you'll watch," Jake countered, his tone firm. "Here's the thing, Mark. Growth doesn't come from staying in the comfort zone. It demands risk. If I'm willing to pursue this path with Emma, I won't let anyone stand in my way. Not you, not anyone." Mark studied him for a beat longer. That part of Jake felt a crack, the type born from pressure that signals the possibility of breakthrough. "That's a bold declaration, my friend. Just remember, every choice comes with consequences." Nodding, Jake knew this to be true. He would need to face the implications of his decision-making, learned through the calculated risks of his previous failures. But perhaps the weight of those failures could be shifted, transformed into lessons that fueled his desire for authentic connection. He would learn to navigate the labyrinth of his own emotions, not just with Emma, but within himself. As the kitchen buzzed with life outside their exchange, Jake felt compelled to shift the narrative once more. "You're absolutely right, Mark, and maybe your next move should be to prepare for my return," he said lightly, a tension melting away with a hint of humor. Mark blinked in surprise, clearly taken aback by the sudden levity. "Return? So there is something here?" With a smile spreading across Jake's face, he felt a sense of freedom blooming. He knew that confrontation didn't solely manifest in conflict, but in the breaking down of walls, embracing vulnerability, and engaging wholeheartedly in the journey ahead. Leaving the kitchen, Jake grasped the reality that an evening spent with Emma could unearth new paths, unveiling a future aligned more closely with his authentic self rather than that of a placid bystander. His heart thrummed with anticipation. Yet, as he prepared to re-enter the warmth of bright lights and laughter, shadows whispered their doubts. Was he truly ready to confront his insecurities? The question loomed heavily in the air, a riddle he had yet to solve. With each step toward Emma, he felt the weight of that riddle shift, a mixture of hope and fear intertwining in an intricate dance. Would he find the strength to confront the fears that still lurked, or would he allow the comfort of the familiar to drag him back into old patterns? The tension stirred within him, that familiar inner conflict rising again. What awaited him on the other side of this turning point, renewal or stagnation? Before he could ponder further, Mark's voice broke through once more. "You've got to face whatever lies ahead, Jake. Are you truly ready for it?" That question reverberated in his mind as he stepped into the crowd, a fresh wave of uncertainty washing over him. The threshold to a pivotal moment was there, but would he walk through it? Jake stepped back into the lively atmosphere. The overwhelming combination of laughter and chatter crashed against the walls of his brewing anxiety. He scanned the room, searching for Emma, hoping she wouldn't notice the tremor in his hands or the uncertainty clouding his thoughts. As he took a moment to ground himself in the reality of the vibrant gathering, he felt a persistent pull toward his desire for change. This was not merely a festive occasion, it was an opportunity for transformation. In the corner, Emma sparkled like a beacon. Her laughter floated through the haze of conversation, her eyes bright with the thrill of connection. She was surrounded by friends, but it was her presence that carved open a new space in Jake's heart, one filled with warmth, excitement, and undeniable potential. Yet a gnawing fear whispered in his ear, cautioning him against exposure and vulnerability. The opposition was palpable. Either he moved forward with her or retreated into safe obscurity. He approached, fighting against the urge to second-guess himself. What if he stammered over his words? What if his past insecurities resurfaced and painted his interactions with invisible barriers? No. He steadied his breath, anchoring himself with the knowledge that growth lay in confronting those very fears. "Hey, Jake!" Emma turned, her eyes widening in delight. She moved toward him, the crowd swelling around them like a tide, yet nothing distracted from the current that flowed between them. "I was hoping to find you," he managed, glancing
sideways at the group surrounding her, then back to her. "I wanted to talk." Before she responded, he could read a hint of curiosity mixed with concern on her face, as though she sensed the gravity of his intentions. "Sure, what's up?" The warmth of her smile almost made him forget the weight of his words, but he pressed on. "I know these past months have been, tumultuous, but I'm at a point where I want to take a step forward. With us, I mean." The chatter around them faded, replaced by a charged silence that buzzed between them. Emma's smile faltered slightly, replaced by soft vulnerability as she processed his statement. "Jake, you know that she began, a hesitant glance down at her drink. "It's not that easy to decipher what 'us' means. You've been great, but—" He felt her distance like a phantom. The challenge Mark had issued before gave him resolve. He needed to confront the fears that tethered him, not just for himself, but for Emma as well. "I get it. I've been struggling to figure my life out too, but I've realized that it's okay to embrace the uncertain. That's part of the journey, right?" Jake's heartfelt admission seemed to strike a chord. Emma's eyes searched his, her expression shifting from uncertainty to intrigue. "You're right. We can't always know what's ahead, but—" "That's what makes it exciting," Jake interjected, his enthusiasm rising. "I want to explore this with you. I want to discover what we can be together." He held his breath, a crescendo of anticipation building inside him. The stakes were astronomically personal. He could not afford to misstep. Emma's gaze softened, her internal struggle surfacing. Perhaps she had also felt the silence between them stretching, filled with unspoken aspirations and fears alike. "I want that too, Jake," she finally confessed, the warmth of her truth radiating toward him. But then she hesitated once more. "But are you really ready? Like, really ready?" Her question struck him again, echoing Mark's earlier challenge, but now it morphed into an invitation and a test. "Yes," he stated firmly, capturing the gravity of the moment. "I want to embrace all of it. The good, the messy, the unknown. I want to face it, all of it, with you." As the words left his lips, he felt both exhilarated and terrified. Would she step toward him, or would she remain in the shadows of caution? In that heartbeat, he could see the calculated decisions layering in her eyes. In his gut, he sensed the unraveling of something new. He stood at the precipice of opportunity, feeling the thrill of potential flowing between them. Yet he couldn't shake the remaining doubts that encircled him like dark clouds. "Jake," she murmured, her voice a tender thread amidst the crowd's noise. "You really mean that?" He nodded, pressing forward, even as uncertainty danced along the fringes of his resolve. But just then, laughter erupted, momentarily distracting them.
Budding connection. Jake felt a chill creep back in, a reminder of the limitations he could fall back into. Are you willing to risk it? To break free of the old patterns? Jake's mind raced with possibilities, the stakes heightening with her voice still lingering in the air. What would that risk truly entail? And as he caught her gaze once more, the challenge he had begun to embrace felt like a dance on the edge of the abyss. Raising the stakes, he considered what masks he still needed to shed if he were to step into a new rhythm. The question lingered as Jake steeled himself for her answer. Would they leap together or falter back into the comfort of uncertainty? Jake felt the charged silence stretch on, thickening the air around them. Emma's surprised expression was both a beacon of hope and a mirror reflecting his own internal turmoil. He took a step back, wrestling with the gravity of her question and the embodiment of his aspirations. Would he really risk everything to forge a deeper connection? "Let's not dance around this," Emma finally said, her tone growing serious. "What if this doesn't work? What if we're just looking for something that isn't there? I don't want to hurt you or for you to hurt me." The winds of doubt whirled through Jake's mind, stirring up old fears. He thought about the last time he had opened himself up, the vulnerability he had shown, and the aftermath that had left scars still healing. Was he ready to confront those demons again? Did he have the strength to push through the fear that threatened to consume him? "I know it's a risk," he replied, his voice steady despite the storms raging within him. "But isn't it worth it? What we could become together? I believe there's something real here, something that goes beyond just fear." She studied him, her brow furrowing in thought. He could see the flicker of consideration in her eyes battling with apprehension. "You make it sound so simple," she challenged gently, a hint of a smile breaking through. "But it's never just about the possibility, Jake. What if we get caught up in all this and regret it later?" "Regret is inevitable," he said, a resolution building within him. "Not taking chances, that's the real regret. I've spent too much time wallowing in what-ifs." He took a deep breath, the crowd around them fading for a split second as his focus sharpened. "I am ready to face whatever comes our way. You deserve that kind of honesty from me, and I deserve to meet my own potential too." He noticed Emma's breath hitch slightly and felt a newfound determination swell within him. She was the catalyst, the spark that triggered a deeper understanding of himself. This moment, raw and unfiltered, was a churning pot of emotions, and he was about to either run from it or dive deeper. As he spoke, a thread of vulnerability began to weave through his words. "You know, I've always been driven by fear. Fear of failure, fear of being inadequate as a father, as a partner. But talking with you feels different, like I can push against those fears." Emma's posture shifted. She leaned in closer, absorbing his revelation. "You've questioned yourself because of past failures, but you're not defined by them. You can redefine your story. We both can." Jake felt a fire igniting within him, stoked by her recognition. Each pulse of his heartbeat seemed to echo the urgency of doing something, of not allowing indecision to snuff out this budding connection. "But how do we do that?" he asked, needing clarity, a path to traverse beyond this crossroads. "We start by being completely open," she replied, her voice imbued with a newfound strength. "No more holding back. Let's share our stories, our fears. Are you willing to show me the side of you that you've kept hidden?" A wave of apprehension washed over him, yet beneath it lay an undercurrent of exhilaration. She was asking him to do the very thing he had cultivated the courage to confront: intimacy. "Yes, I'm ready. I need to break down those walls," he breathed out, feeling his pulse quicken. They stood in a bubble of connection, the world moving swiftly around them while they teetered on the edge of change. Jake's heart thrummed with anticipation and a hint of fear. Would this unveiling lead to understanding, acceptance, and perhaps even love? But questions loomed like dark clouds. Could he truly face the ghosts of his past and still emerge whole? What other layers of his personal narrative needed to be revealed? Just then, a loud burst of laughter erupted nearby, jolting Jake back to the reality of the gathering. It felt like a reminder of the distractions he had been fighting against. "Tell me what you're afraid of, Jake," Emma prodded gently, her voice a brook amidst the chaos. His resolve began to waver, and Jake felt the urge to retreat. If he exposed himself fully, would it all come crashing down around them? The possibility of revealing his deepest fears was both liberating and terrifying. But the question remained, was he prepared to face that vulnerability head-on? Or would he fall back into the familiar patterns that confined him? Caught between the desire for a genuine connection and the instinct to shield himself, Jake's world narrowed down to Emma's expectant gaze. In that pivotal moment, the stakes had never been higher. Transformation hung in the balance. "Tell me," she urged, a blend of challenge and encouragement illuminating her voice. And Jake felt the weight of his choice settle heavy on his shoulders. Would he risk it all, or slip back into shadows? The air felt electric, heavy with the tension of unspoken words, as Jake stood frozen, grappling with the weight of the moment. Emma's unwavering gaze practically challenged him to dive into the depths of his vulnerability. He could pull away, retreat, into the safety of silence, or he could face this moment head-on. His mind raced. What lay behind the fortress he had constructed around himself? The mere thought sent shivers down his spine. "I'm scared," he began, his voice barely above a whisper, but the words felt monumental. "I'm scared of failing again, of not being enough, for you, as a father, as a man. I had a vision of what my life would be like, but it's all been clouded by setbacks and disappointments." Each confession felt like a tiny step into uncharted territory, the solid ground of his defenses slipping away with each word. As he spoke, Jake began to realize how empowering it was to declare his fears aloud. The intricate webs of doubt that had trapped him for so long started to unravel, strand by strand. It was terrifying, yet oddly exhilarating. Emma listened with rapt attention, her expression softening into understanding. He recognized that by speaking his truth, he was not only revealing a hidden part of himself to her, but also to himself. "Why do you feel inadequate?" Emma asked, her voice steady and encouraging. "Was it what others expected from you, or was it a fear you placed on yourself?" Her question stirred a chaotic mix of memories within him, piquing curiosity while igniting frustrations. "I guess I've always felt like I had to measure up to this imaginary standard, whether it was as a husband, a father, or even a friend. Every failure felt like a confirmation of my inadequacy, and I've allowed that to define me." As he contemplated his relationship with his past, he understood the crux of his conflict. He had internalized the disappointments he had encountered, wearing them like a heavy coat that distorted his identity. It was suffocating, yet there was a flicker of liberation within this revelation. "Have you ever thought that maybe those standards are just that, imaginary?" Emma interjected, her tone filled with compassion. "What if, instead of measuring yourself by what others expect, you embrace your reality? You are enough, just as you are." Her words wrapped around him like a warm blanket on a cold night. It struck Jake how important it was to understand that perception could be shifted. This was not just an exercise in openness, it was a turning point that would allow him to reshape both his self-image and his relationships. "That's easier said than done," he countered, feeling the urge to retreat. The doubts resurfaced like uninvited ghosts. What if I try to let go of those walls and fail? What if I put myself out there and it doesn't work? The prospect of potential rejection loomed larger than ever. "Failure is part of growth," Emma assured him, her eyes illuminated by a fierce determination that sparked something inside him. Every moment is an opportunity for learning, and every relationship, every risk, even if it falters, is a step toward growth. Encouraged by her perspective, Jake took a deep breath and felt the weight in his chest eased just slightly. He wanted to feel this fire igniting his determination, to challenge the patterns of doubt that had lingered too long. Maybe it was time to reclaim not just his past, but also his narrative. "Okay," he said, empowered by the clarity of his realization. "I'm willing to try. I'm willing to view this differently and let my past inform me but not define me." Emma smiled, a radiant warmth blooming in her eyes. "Then let's start fresh, right here." As they both leaned closer, a shared understanding enveloped them. It was a pact forged in honesty and courage, the first step towards something meaningful. Yet a lingering question washed over him like an approaching storm. As much as Jake felt emboldened, he couldn't shake the visceral fear that still clawed at the back of his mind. What if he opened up at the deepest level, only to have it thrown back in his face? What if the walls he tried to dismantle were the very ones that kept his heart safe? The familiar urge to retreat whispered in his ear, each second stretching like a taut string ready to snap. Would he find solace in this new journey, or would the past just be a greater monster lurking in the shadows, waiting to pounce? "Promise me," Jake said, his voice thick with emotion, "if we're going to do this, we'll both be all in, no holding back." "Promise," Emma echoed, her voice steady, excitement threading through her tone. As they sealed their tacit agreement, uncertainty cascaded around them. Little did they know, the challenge they were embarking on would test the very foundation of their fears, and unleashing their truths might just unravel far more than they anticipated. A sudden thought pierced through Jake's mind. What if facing his past brought something even darker to light? The prospect sent an icy shiver down his spine. What would they uncover together, and could they emerge unscathed? As the days turned into weeks, Jake found himself grappling with how to integrate his newfound resolve into his daily life. Each morning became a battleground of sorts, with his ambition to embrace vulnerability constantly pitted against his instinct to retreat into familiar patterns of silence. He noticed that small moments transformed into significant turning points under the weight of his commitment. One afternoon, while preparing lunch for his daughter Lily, Jake stood at the counter, chopping vegetables. The rhythmic motion helped calm his mind, but thoughts of the conversation with Emma lingered, a gentle reminder of the promise he had made. It was now up to him to bring change into his life, to illuminate the shadows that had once felt insurmountable. Lily's laughter disrupted his thoughts. It was contagious, and he couldn't help but smile as he adjusted his focus back to her. She was fiercely proud of her latest drawings, which she showcased with such enthusiasm that he felt his heart swell. "Daddy, look! This for you!" she exclaimed, holding up a crumpled piece of paper scrawled with an array of colors. He took the artwork from her, admiration bubbling inside him. Yet, amid the joy of her innocent creativity, a familiar current of self-doubt crept in. Am I enough for her? The question loomed, and he scolded himself for allowing that doubt to surface again. It was precisely the question he had promised to challenge. In that moment of recognition, he took a breath and made a silent vow. To view himself through Lily's eyes, to believe in his role as her father. "Thank you, sweetheart. This is beautiful," he said, a newfound warmth igniting his words. As he watched her beam with pride, he felt a shift in the air around him. Small victories like this were what he needed, daily reminders that to be enough meant embracing himself fully. Later, inspired by their exchange, Jake initiated a small project with Lily, creating a scrapbook filled with her artwork and the words he hadn't always found courage to express. As he masoned the pages with her creations, he caught himself pondering his own talents, his long dormant passion for writing. Once he had envisioned crafting stories that would dance upon the pages as vibrantly as Lily's crayons marked their canvas. But then he remembered the whims of expectation, the fear of how his words might be perceived. Still, a spark ignited within him, urging him to weave together his thoughts in a new light. After dinner, with Lily tucked into bed, he opened his laptop and began writing. The words flowed hesitantly at first, as if rediscovering an old friend. But gradually a rhythm emerged, a voice both authentic and raw. Feeling buoyed, Jake decided to share snippets of his writing with Emma, fearing yet eager to get her opinion. Hitting the send button felt monumental. Would she see the potential he felt was hidden beneath layers of insecurity? The following morning, on his way to work, Jake received a reply from Emma. He held on to the steering wheel, his heart pounding as he opened the message. Her encouraging words washed over him, infusing him with a sense of validation he had long yearned for but rarely allowed himself to accept. But as he drove, another thought flickered beneath the surface. The realization that not everyone might share Emma's perspective. What if others chastised his passion or heckled his vulnerability? The familiar wave of doubt crashed against his newfound resolve, a duality spinning in his mind. He parked in his usual space, pulse racing, grappling with conflicting emotions. It struck him, every step forward bore the weight of potential scrutiny. To pursue growth openly while grappling with fear created an inevitable tension he had yet to fully comprehend. At work, he found himself lost in contemplation, the noise of the office blending into a cacophony. It was there, among spreadsheets and PowerPoints, that he recognized an unintentional crossroads forming before him. Leaning into his past vulnerabilities, Jake began to weave them into his work relationships, sharing his writing journey with colleagues in casual conversations. However, the uncertainty of opening up lingered. Would they accept this version of him, or would he meet fresh waves of judgment? Jake's heart raced with the impending unknown. Could he truly embody the fearless individual he aspired to be? As he stepped into a meeting later that afternoon, Jake looked around the room, filled with peers. Every face represented an expectation, yet he felt the tension sharpening within him. What if this was the moment he needed to seize? What if, by expressing his aspirations, he discovered not just their opinions, but a flicker of support? Determined, Jake took a deep breath, preparing to let his vulnerabilities unfurl one more time. The moment had arrived to unveil a chapter of his life, perhaps even the one he had sought to safeguard. Was he ready to break that final wall and expose the depths of who he was to others? The stakes felt higher now, and the outcome uncertain. With every pulse echoing the desire to embrace full authenticity, he opened the meeting, ready for the challenge that awaited him. Would this step forward lead to empowerment, rejection, or a new path altogether? As Jake stood at the precipice of transformation, he sensed the tide of change swell within him. Each day, he chose to face his fears head-on, demonstrating the simple yet profound power of vulnerability. After weeks of careful consideration and open dialogue with Emma, something shifted in him. No longer was he shackled by the weight of his insecurities. He felt a solid confidence swelling, buoyed by the rewards his new mindset had already begun to yield. The meeting had come and gone, and, to his surprise, his colleagues responded positively to his shared experiences. They didn't recoil. Instead, they resonated with his authenticity, forging connections born of mutual vulnerability. Jake felt the warmth of recognition, realizing that his desire to share his self-discovery had not only enriched his life, but enriched the lives of those around him as well. It was not just his unearthing of hidden talents and memories. It was a tapestry woven from the threads of shared struggles, triumphs, and fears. As he engaged with his coworkers more openly, he received unexpected praise. A colleague offered him a chance to present to upper management based on a project he'd previously hesitated to champion.
The idea of submitting his writing for a company blog flickered like a beacon, illuminating pathways he had long ignored. Each step forward, however small, validated the growth he was chasing. Yet the most profound connection in his transformation was still Emma. Their conversations blossomed into heartfelt discussions, often touching on their dreams and fears, yet framed by a sense of mutual respect and encouragement. One evening, as they shared a quiet dinner filled with laughter and lingering glances, Jake knew that the veil of uncertainty he once wore had all but dissolved. "Jake, I've been meaning to tell you something," Emma said, her voice softening as she picked at her leftover pasta. "Watching you open up and embrace who you are has been inspiring. You've built this incredible sense of strength that didn't just surface, it's rooted deep." He felt a swell of pride rising within him, grounding his realization. He had finally allowed himself to be seen. "You've helped me get there," he replied, locking his gaze on hers. "If it weren't for you encouraging me to share my story, I might still be hiding." With every conversation, every dinner, every shared silence, they forged a deeper bond, one anchored in authenticity. Jake felt an overwhelming sense of fulfillment. He had dismantled emotional barriers while cultivating connections that transcended the surface. Their shared understanding grew organically. Moments of joy replaced the shadows, and as they discussed their aspirations, Jake began to recognize his own worth beyond self-imposed limitations. Then came the pivotal night that forged a new chapter entirely. Jake invited Emma to join him for an open mic poetry night, an arena he had once tiptoed around in fear of judgment. But this time he felt ready to step boldly into a space where both his art and emotions could flourish. As he stood backstage, anticipation coursing through him, he glanced at Emma in the audience with a resolve that solidified his place there. When his name was called, he walked toward the center stage, heart pounding yet invigorated by purpose. With each word he shared, he wove tales of vulnerability, gratitude, and resilience. The audience captured his emotion. The raw honesty resonated throughout the room. He felt liberated. Word by word, he peeled back the layers of fear and hesitation, revealing his true self, not just to them, but to himself. The applause erupted, echoing like an affirmation of every ounce of courage he had summoned. It was as if that moment crowned him. He had officially stepped beyond the limitations imposed by his past, emerging as someone who had conquered not just the stage, but his own narrative. When he stepped off stage, he found Emma waiting, her eyes shimmering with pride. "Jake, that was incredible," she breathed, pulling him into a tight embrace. In that moment, he could feel the weight of doubt lift away completely, replaced by a profound sense of belonging. Jake realized he wasn't just achieving personal recognition. He was building a life filled with authenticity and connection. A life where the shadows of his past transformed into stepping stones for greatness. At long last, he understood the beauty of embracing vulnerability, the strength found in sharing pain, and the incomparable joy of forging resilient bonds. With Emma by his side, Jake knew he had finally created not merely the possibility of a future, but a kaleidoscope of opportunities for both himself and his children. No longer defined by the specters of grief, he stood confident in his identity, equipped to nurture and embrace whatever lay ahead. "Let's keep exploring this path together," Jake said.
Emma's smile said it all, poised for whatever would come next. Emma's smile said it all, a shared promise that they would continue evolving, hand in hand, into a brighter tomorrow together. As they walked into the night, the stars glimmered above, nothing less than a testimony to the journey they had both taken, a journey that had transformed the heartache of yesterday into the glorious potential of today and beyond. Before embarking on your own journey of growth, you need to subscribe now to stay inspired by the next exclusive emotional stories. This is the moment to show your support.
Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and help others find their path. Don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Your support matters, and only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of lifting each other up through these actions.